2023 has to be one of the goofiest years in gaming history. We experienced some extreme highs and some extreme lows, blessed with some masterpieces like Baldur's Gate 3 or Tears of the Kingdom, and then also cursed with some of the most revolting trash that has ever been farted out into the gaming ecosystem. There were a ton of super stinkers this year. Like, the hits were hitting, but the shits, they were shitting. It is crazy how we had such a huge amount of incredible games and extremely bad ones. Like, some of the worst games in recent memory came out this year, and sometimes within a month of each other. Choosing just 5 games for this list was actually pretty difficult because there were so many that could have broken into the top 5. But using the scientific method, I was able to break it down here to the factually, objectively correct take for what are the worst 5 games of 2023. So this is the end of the year pseudo Moisties awards ceremony. I'll briefly explain why it's not an official Moisties production. It's because I didn't moist meter any of these games. I only finished one of them on this list because the others were just impossible for a human being to endure. I felt like I suffered the same agony as Dante when he went to hell. So I just didn't moist meter them. And now let's get in there. At number 5, we have Redfall. In a surprise to nobody, Redfall makes this list. This is an unforgettable stain on Arcane. Arcane is a great developer. They have a solid resume, so this game obviously had a lot of hype before it came out, which was immediately thrown down the tubes when it was revealed that the game wouldn't even run at 60 FPS on the Xbox, and this was supposed to be one of their big Xbox exclusives of the year, so they put on the clown makeup for that one and really played the fool. It completely took all of the momentum out of the title's launch and immediately just became a bit of a joke. The game released and it was worse than anyone could have imagined. Unfun, half-baked, the world is completely empty, filled to the brim with glitches out the wazoo. The AI is brain dead even at the highest difficulty. It just offers nothing even remotely fun. There is no redeeming qualities for Redfall unless you're looking at something to point and laugh at, but even that novelty wears off like 2 or 3 hours into it. Then it just becomes a tedious chore for everything. They couldn't even be bothered to put real cutscenes in the game, they just have still images that they pan a camera around. It's so lazy and pathetic, really. It was so bad that Phil Spencer himself even name-dropped it when he was talking about a bit of their flops this year and how they believed that Xbox wasn't really doing enough to even be considered a competitor in the console wars, which, for some reason, when I bring that up, some Xbox enthusiasts tell me I'm lying. He literally went on record and said this. You can watch it for yourself or read it for yourself. It's all right there at your fingertips. Just go on Google, go to this source, that source, any source really. He himself mentioned that Xbox wasn't doing enough this year, and I do agree. And Redfall was one of the things that he pointed out as being a blemish. Now, moving on to number 4, I think this one's going to have a few of you with your jaw on the floor for the placement on this one. No one's going to be surprised it's here, but I think you will be shocked to learn that number 4 goes to Gollum. Lord of the Rings Gollum game. This was by most considered to be the worst game of the year. And when I posted my video on it, I called it worst game of the year so far. I had the foresight to predict that it might actually get worse than Gollum, and by golly, I tell you, I swear with my hand on a stack of Bibles, somehow it did. Gollum is number 4 for the worst game of the year. That's how you know this year was special, because any other year this would have been easily number 1. So, what makes Gollum so shitty? Just look at it. It's a stealth game and a platformer, but none of the mechanics work well. It is extraordinarily boring. This is the only game on the list I was actually able to finish, though, because it became something like a challenge for me. This was my display of strength, my Gordian knot that I needed to cut, beating this game. So I pushed through all 5 or 6 miserable hours of this experience and beat it, just to say that I'm one of the few that did. So I got my $50 worth out of this one, I tell you what. But this game was so bad that it actually led to the studio being shut down for it, because not only did it not sell well, but the reception was so overwhelmingly negative that they viewed it as, I guess, embarrassing or shameful, and they just closed the doors on the studio, which is actually extremely sad, because the studio makes good games outside of Gollum. the games that they're known for making are not stealth platformers like Gollum was. That was their first attempt at doing it, and they just didn't know how to do it correctly, so it led to this trash. But I was still upset to learn that the studio was closed in response to this game. Now, Gollum is horrible, and you're probably scratching your head, what could be worse than Gollum? Well, turn your attention to number 3 on this list, because we got a real heater. We've got Rise of Kong. Yes, this puppy's coming from the genius visionaries, the Imagineers over at GameMill, an infamous studio known for producing absolute abominations. And they looked at the catalog of games that came out this year. They said, you know what? We've got Redfall. We've got Gollum. But we can do worse. So they did. They pooped Kong out here within the last 3 months of the year and said, hey, this is what we've got. How do you feel about it? And everyone groaned all at the same time. This is like a $40 to $50 game, and it plays and looks like something a student in university could have thrown together in 48 hours while overdosing on Xanax. It is absolutely atrocious in every measurable category. There isn't a single redeeming feature of this game, and the most insulting thing is that, once again, a GameMill classic, it uses a beloved IP, Kong, and ruins it. It delivers a terrible game that nobody in the world, I imagine, can find a single positive thing about, which is basically GameMill's slogan at this point for the games they produce. Which brings us to our super surprise special. We've got a tie for third place, actually, and it's another GameMill game. It's The Walking Dead Destinies. This puppy came out 3 weeks ago. They said, you know what? We're not done shoveling shit in your mouth. Open wide, gamers. Here's our ass, and enjoy what comes out. And boy, howdy, did I not enjoy it at all. This game is, again, completely miserable, and again, takes a very popular IP and runs it into the ground. Even though the show itself kind of ran itself into the ground a little bit, but that's a topic for a different day. The Walking Dead Destinies does nothing right, per usual. Takes a page out of Redfall's playbook here with the cutscenes, where it's just slideshows. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible. The gameplay, if you can even call it that, is beyond sluggish and seems like it's just there to waste your time so that way you can't get a refund after 2 hours on Steam. It is incomprehensible how GameMill keeps getting away with this. I truly believe in the conspiracy that they must have blackmail on all of these major franchises and just strong-arm them into letting them use their IP to make this shovelware throwaway garbage. There is no way these games make any money for them, because I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in the world that actually buys these bitches. Nobody buys them. The trailers look horrible. Like, there's no one that ever actually falls for this, except for maybe, like, elderly grandparents that buy these games for their children not knowing gaming or something, so accidentally purchasing this. I just don't see their business model. There's no way they're making money. This has to be a money laundering scheme or something. I don't get it, but yeah. I couldn't decide which GameMill game was worse there, so I let them duke it out and share the stage together at the number 3 for worst of the year. And that brings us to number 2. We have an actual scam game, The Day Before. I had covered this game about a year ago when everyone was talking about how, like, all the gameplay trailers and shit are fake. The game's not real, it's never coming out. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago, and this bad boy actually comes out. And it is nothing like the trailers led people to believe. It was a completely different game, and it was nearly unplayable. There was nothing in there that even shared the same DNA as what they were showing throughout the last year or so. From the most wishlisted game on Steam under a false pretense to one of the most universally hated games when it dropped. And then 4 days later, the studio behind it announced they were shutting their doors. They immediately just called it quits, gave up. They had their cake, they ate it too, they made their influx of cash off this and then said, alright, we're sailing off into the sunset, dropping this broken pile of garbage, this dog shit on everyone's doorstep. And for the few fans that were still holding on to the hope that maybe they'd get a game that's decent, you know, they'd waited so long for The Day Before, that was immediately ruined. And they never even bothered to try and fix it. Now, of course, I think everyone did get refunds for this. I think Steam themselves even stepped in and issued refunds. So at least people got their money back, but what a disaster of a game. It's actually disrespectful to even call this a game, because this really seemed like they panicked just to produce something to avoid a potential lawsuit. That's my theory on it, at least. because this never even tried. Like, for a zombie game, the most zombies I ever saw on the map at any given time was 4. It was also nearly impossible to run into any other players. It also ended up being a fucking extraction shooter, which is not at all what they advertised in the slightest. So I don't even know if I can really call this a game. It was just legitimately a fucking scam, which is why it's got the comfortable number 2 spot here. But you know what's got the number 1 spot for the worst game of the year? Well, none other than another GameMill production. Of the 6 worst games I could think of this year, 3 of them belong to GameMill. That is a historical achievement. Usually a studio will have 1, maybe 2 bad games in a year, at most. It's unheard of to have 3. And in the span of about 4 months, I believe, is when all of them came out. Like, round of applause, GameMill. You really outshit yourself for this one. This was incredible. The number 1 worst game of the year is Avatar: Quest for Balance. I think it is GameMill's worst game since Big Rigs Over the Road Racing. Many of you don't know this, but that was a GameMill game. Often considered the worst game ever produced in the history of gaming. That was GameMill. That's got their fucking stamped seal of quality. But Avatar: Quest for Balance is closely behind it. Not only is the gameplay the most monotonous gameplay imaginable, I'm almost 100% certain they must have lifted this from the Nickelodeon website from back in the day or something and like poorly copy and pasted it here and upgraded the graphics. And upgraded I'm using really generously here because it looks like shit. Everything about it sucks. But what hurts the most is that it takes, again, a beloved IP and produces the worst imaginable game for it. I love Avatar, and to see GameMill get their grubby little paws on it and produce this is nothing shy of an insult and them spitting in my face and any other face of fans. And the worst part is, I know some kids got this game as a present for their birthday or for the holidays or something because Avatar's on it in the name, and it's $50. They're charging $50 for this trash. I think Avatar: Quest for Balance very narrowly squeaks out the number 1 spot over Day Before. Day Before is a scam, like an actual scam game, and Avatar is arguably a scam game because it is so fucking lazy and trash that it's clear this was just made to get a couple of quick sales from confused customers that didn't know anything about it aside from the IP's name on the box. It is so impressive how horrible GameMill is. And I'm pretty sure they do it on purpose. You can't accidentally make games this bad. Like I said on stream every time I play a GameMill game, it is immediately apparent that they are not using like assets that you'd buy on the marketplace for the engines they use. Because if they did, their games would instantly look better. They are going out of their way to make their games look and play worse than if you had just purchased some cheap assets to throw in there. Like, it's incomprehensible to me. What a year GameMill had. What a fucking year. Oh, and I forgot to mention, in Avatar: Quest for Balance, half of the gameplay, like, it's divided up. You'll do, like, some of the worst puzzles ever, then some of the worst combat ever, and then you go into Subway Surfers. They actually just have Subway Surfers. That's how shameless this game is. It's horrible. I think it deserves the number 1 spot for worst game of 2023. Unfortunately, I don't have a trophy for you, GameMill, so there's nothing for you to collect. But if you want to celebrate this impressive feat, this accomplishment, if you want to celebrate it on your socials, I can whip you up a graphic or something. It'll say your winner, which is of course a throwback and homage to Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, and then it can have your 3 horrible games that made this list for the worst of the year. Really impressive stuff. That's about it. See ya.